views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we are weeks away from the annual Race for Re-Entry, and our friend and the founder of the Race for Re-Entry, Jen Lackard, is back in studio with us with our series-long commitment here at Perspectives to help raise awareness for the work she's doing and for the Bronx, as well as for those impacted by incarceration. That's coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for watching. And guess what? We invite you to stay connected to us. You can stay connected to us by watching Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67, as well as our social networking sites. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Daren C. Jaime, that's professional Facebook page, DC Jaime 23. But then most of all, anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. And there you can find about some past episodes, some future episodes, share your perspective. I might respond with my perspective, you never know, but that's what social media is all about. Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we continue our month-long commitment to talking about incarceration and re-entry. We have been talking about it all month long, and our guest in the studio today has a real passion for serving those people who've been impacted by incarceration, whether it's directly or indirectly. And she's the founder of the Race for Re-Entry, New York City's first multi-platform collectively centered on re-entry and the mission of creating a safe and inclusive community in neighborhoods that are impacted by incarceration. And her annual Race for Re-Entry is only weeks away. She joins us now here on Perspectives once more to share details about her mission, her partnerships, and the resources that this race provides in communities to the Bronx. We're joined by Jen Lackard, and we welcome her back to the show. And then she's also joined by Minister Kwame Thompson, a member of the Stand Up to Violence team and head of the Power to Purpose. And also joining us, Solomon Baker Paul, a federal officer who actually apprehended a shooter while off duty and has a wonderful story of compassion and how his heroic actions inspired a community. That's up here on Perspectives. And Jen, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Good. And so we're getting a little bit closer to the race. And as always, we start a little bit with just letting our viewers know this is our month-long commitment. But please let us know about the Race for Re-Entry and what it's all about.
Well, it started off as a 5K walk, run, bike that we started last year. We had a couple of hundred people come out. It's about raising awareness about the needs of people impacted by incarceration, of course, but then it's also about the fact that the Bronx is the unhealthiest county. And we want to get people out and active and really more mindful of health and more health conscious of issues that are happening here locally, so they can be better stewards of their body and then also of their community.
Mm-hmm. And so you got some special guests here. I want to go right over here to Mr. Kwame Thompson, and you're taking part again. And I know that you were introduced to Jen. You had an opportunity to do this once before. And talk about the experience and why you decided to partner back.
Well, it's a great experience. I'm very community-minded, safer communities, more effective communities, networking and building bridges in the community. So I definitely see a need to collaborate with Jen with that project, being that in our community we have a lot of people that's dealing with re-entry, and they need the information and the help to get back into society.
And so after your first experience, talk about the experience at Race for Re-Entry. What did you take away?
Well, it was great seeing the community come together. One of the things I really enjoyed was the basketball game against the police department, getting the community to actively be involved with them, seeing each other as human beings on the same court, being competitive, being compassionate, you know. That was really great for me in the community.
Jen?
I laugh because there was a Snapchat of him, and there's a Snapshot of like the preacher went swoosh, like, because he made this shot, like clear across, you know, the court, and that hit Snapchat, and it's just like, you know, how people are it's all about community. You have people from all walks of life coming. The SUV team was there.
Yes.
You know, we had kids, we had adults, law enforcement. So it was truly collaborative, and I'm looking forward to the one that we're having on the 14th, and then also sort of future stuff that we do with NYPD, because they're really good partners. The 43rd precinct, I am just, you know, they're like dear to my heart. I seem to think they're the best precinct in NYPD. I'm sure there are others that feel the same way, but you know, there's something special about there. And they really were the driving force behind making this successful, committing the police power to not only just police the event, which what they would do with the standard permit and what needs to happen, but really committing resources and brand new officers to come out, participate in our community conversations that we're having on Monday, April 16th, which is really a frank and respectful way to talk. It's an exchange about experiences from both perspectives. And so we had NCOs, we had rookies, sergeants, lieutenants, brass. We had Pichardo, who's now assistant chief. He was in the room. So I think we had a really good conversation, and if it wasn't for their support around this, I think we would not have been able to make it work. So we're back again the second year strong.
Good, second year and going. And listen, I want to take time now to introduce Officer Solomon Baker Paul. And he has a very unique story, and we'll walk a little bit into that. And from the way we understand it, Jen, you walk us through the story a little bit, but you apprehended a young man.
Yes.
And this young man had a firearm.
Yes.
And walk us through the situation. You can tell better than I can.
Well, I was in the area of 2040 Bruckner Boulevard. I have family over there. And I was just returning a cup of coffee. And there were shots that were fired near my vehicle. And of course, in that situation, as any off-duty officer would do to serve and protect, we serve an order. We have an oath that we all go by. And my immediate instinct was just to make sure I get an understanding of what's going on, I get an observation. And there was a young gentleman just firing a weapon away, just shooting indiscriminately. And of course, my instinct was to contact NYPD and inform them, as well as to try to de-escalate the situation. And because of all the shootings that have been going around the country, I'm off duty. The last thing I want to hear about is another black male, Hispanic male being shot. And if you could try to de-escalate, and in my experience as a federal officer and a correctional officer before that, I wanted to make sure that this young man could have a life. Try to de-escalate that because there were other individuals, civilians around. I was able to apprehend the suspect, place him in cuffs, make sure that NYPD came, and the gentleman was able to be escorted, by NYPD to jail. To their precinct. And from there, the feeling that I was able to provide some protection. Mm-hmm. Though I wasn't on official duty, I have a right to act off of duty to ensure that your life, and everyone here on the panel knows that I will give my life, if necessary, so that anyone has a right to live. Everyone has that right. And if that gentleman would have shot or killed someone, that would have been a tragic incident because of cars passing on a Bruckner. Right. And that's the story that I want to share, that I took the time to every step of the way, calculating, talking to the gentleman.
Right, so walk me through this here, because here he is, he's firing shots in the air?
He was actually firing towards the Bruckner Expressway.
Okay.
And there were cars passing by. And I just couldn't understand what was the reason. And because I felt the best necessary option for me was to get his attention. And once I gained his attention, I was able to de-escalate the situation. Of course, a pursuit occurred because he ran.
Right, so now he's firing,
Yes.
and you identify yourself.
Correct.
He begins to run.
Yes.
And so now you're chasing behind him.
Correct.
Okay, so you're chasing behind him. Is he firing back at you?
No. When I first encountered him, I shouted, "Stop. Police, drop your weapon." He looked at me, yelled, "No, don't shoot." He ran away. I ran after him. He ran around the corner of the building. He threw the gun down. He fell on the ground. I was able to, once again, detain him without any type of retaliation from him, or type of firing back, because he did not look at me. Mm-hmm. He just dropped on the ground, and then I was able to handcuff him. And I asked him what was going on, but he couldn't really speak that much English because he was of Hispanic descent. But still, it was just another issue of, do you have to use deadly force? There's always options to making or decline to de-escalate a situation, and that's exactly what I did. And I felt happy about that because now we have innocent lives that were not affected. No one was killed, no one was injured, and the Bronx community, the city of New York, everyone across the country, we're having these debates about law enforcement. And as a law enforcement officer, as a black law enforcement officer, I'm caught in the middle between what I know what's happening, being a law enforcement officer, and having to deal with the law enforcement side of, well, why didn't you shoot him? Why? I don't have to shoot him. You don't always have to use deadly force.
Right. Let me take a quick break, come back and talk more about this story and then also Jen's race for reentry. We've got a great panel. Stay with us. We're coming right back right after this.
Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant.
It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
And we're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you, and we're talking about the race for reentry. It's Perspectives' month-long commitment to talking about incarceration and the race for reentry. We're glad to have all of our esteemed panel sharing with us. I want to go back. If you didn't know, we're sharing with Solomon Baker Paul. He's a federal officer who was involved in actually apprehending a shooting suspect in the borough of the Bronx. And as you told the story about apprehending this young man, you said he throws the gun down. After he throws the gun down, then all of a sudden you're able to apprehend him. But we know that traditionally in our community, this can go a totally different way. And you were able to, A, de-escalate the situation. Right. But I want to say this because we're looking right now, and I tell people, you're a federal officer, but if I'm watching you right now on TV, you don't look like a federal officer. You look like Solomon from round the way.
And that's exactly what life should be. You should be able to be who you are without having to project who you are. You see, the problem with policing sometimes is that if you have a perception, the perception makes things difficult. You can't see beyond the clouds. But see, me off duty is just like you. Any one of us could be just enjoying our life. I don't carry my job home. I carry myself to the job. I perform my duties. When I leave, I'm a civilian, but I do have rights to enforce the law if there's a serious action, if a person is in danger. Imminent circumstances arise, I'm going to make sure that I protect anyone. It could have been the president, it could have been you, it could be anyone. And I'm going to speak freely. As off-duty, I will put my life on the line. And because I dress this way, I want all the kids, everyone around the nation, and when this goes viral, well, obviously it is viral, that I'm not afraid of what's going to happen or what will be said back, because as a black man in this country, we are being slaughtered. We're being killed, and I'm tired of it. And as a law enforcement officer, I love what NYPD does. I love what all the law enforcement officers do. But today, we need to stand for what right. And what right is to make sure that when I do my job, I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability when I'm at the job. When I'm off duty, I'm gonna make sure that every person has a right to be able to live, because I value life. Because I know what it's like to be in a position where if something happens, now I have to give a response to it. And that's the thing that is called accountability. I want to be able to be accountable for my actions to save lives.
And that's part of what you deal with, making, helping to promote accountability amongst officers, incarceration. And you had the opportunity to meet him at an award ceremony, huh?
Yes, so Kwame and I were at, independently supporting our 43rd precinct. They have a precinct council breakfast. It's an annual breakfast, well attended. And there were many of our community partners that were there. Kwame was representing his organization. I was representing myself and the community board I sit on. And this gentleman, I was sitting at a table and this gentleman was sitting, and may I remind you, I didn't even recognize him today in the studio because how he's dressed right now is not the person who, I literally just walked right by him. And, he tie, very, very formal. So I was a little shocked to hear that he had apprehended the way I saw him. Like, he kind of was so conservative that I didn't expect him to do, I wasn't expecting that. Right. And so then I see today and I'm just like, wow, you can just literally go from one extreme to the other. But that's what we do, right? So we can be chameleons and you kind of form into whatever environment you're in. And I think the race allows us to look at people for who they are, and you don't want to ever be judged for the worst mistake that you ever made in your life for every day of your life. And that's kind of what re-entry is. We don't look at second chances. We don't look at the fact that someone could have just made a mistake. Who knows why the individual was doing what he was doing and shooting at the Bruckner Expressway? I don't know. We don't even want to get in the middle of the why. Right. The reality is that person will go through the system, that person will be sentenced, that person will go through whatever he is given by the court system, and sort of that's not on my side of the spectrum. I'm concerned about when he is ready to come home. Is there a community willing to receive him? And what options and resources are available for him when he comes home? And the more that we have conversations, that we have these large-scale discussions and events to really be a fellowship and support to each other and to create opportunities, the better off we have people coming home, getting jobs, and getting on their feet.
I want to bring Mr. Kwame Thompson in and talk a little bit about your group and how this connects to your work, connects to all this being said.
Definitely. First of all, we started an organization, me and a partner of mine, attorney Janae Nurse, called The Power of Purpose. And what we do is mentor at-risk, high-risk, and court-involved youth. We see that once they find what their purpose is, their mindset changes, their goals changes, their behavior changes. So we believe purpose is the key that unlocks the door to endless possibilities. So we do a lot of mentoring in the communities, through the community centers as well. And also our supervised organization called Stand Up to Violence. And what we do with that is to try to make the communities safer by reducing the gun violence and the homicides in the community. And the way we do it is by, we look at violence like a health approach. So we go after violence like a disease. We identify it, we stop the spread of it, and we treat it. And the way we do it, we use what we call credible messengers. Young men and women that was once in the life, in the street, that have influence in a certain community where there's a lot of gun violence going on, that turn their lives around. And what we do is we utilize them to go back in that community and talk to what we call high-risk individuals. And they do what we call mediations, right? We bring conflict and we show them how to resolve it without it becoming gun violence. So that's what we do through Stand Up to Violence. We've been very effective in the Soundview area, up in Gun Hill, Allerton Avenue. I actually supervise the Soundview section, over in the Bronx River houses and over in that area where there was a lot of gun violence and it's been reduced. It's been very effective. It's state funded. We're out of Jacoby Hospital. So we've seen a lot of good results, being able to reach people, kind of like what he said, people who look like us and we know how to talk to them. We've been there. I've been on the other side when I was a gun carrier and I was making bad decisions and I turned my life around, so I know it's possible.
And so what's the message that you have for, your fellow law enforcement? Because obviously there is a message that can be sent, because this is a situation that obviously could have went a totally different way. We could be reading about a deceased shooter. We could be reading about, even a deceased law enforcement officer, but somebody who's actually able to make a situation and turn it around. What message do you want to send to law enforcement?
Law enforcement, the sacrifice that many of my law enforcement brothers and sisters perform on a daily basis is heartfelt. And I embrace that because I do my part every day. But I would also like to encourage law enforcement officers to understand that there's nothing to fear. Instead, provide yourself the opportunity to try to get to know the community, the people a little bit more, and communicate, articulate. We're taught to articulate. So if you can articulate to someone, you won half the battle. And like the old G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle, that's probably what's going to happen. And that's the reason why I believe if we can just speak more, be more in touch, there may be situations where you cannot speak to someone. And the reason why I took that opportunity to speak to that person is because of all these shootings going around these schools and our children and the environment that's changing in America. You have to look at it from a point of view. Do you use lethal force instead of trying to de-escalate the situation first? And that's what my message is.
Let me take a quick break. And important to note, I guess in a situation like this, you're not wearing a bulletproof vest at all.
No.
So you're pretty much exposed, and that's what heroes do, right? They just jump in and do what they have to do. And so we'll continue a little bit in just a few seconds. We'll be right back right after this.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Love is kind. Love is patient.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
And we are back here on Perspectives, continuing our month-long commitment to talking about reentry and the race for reentry. Jen Lackard here, and got a very special guest, I should say, sharing with us and talking about this. But hearing this, Jen, and talking this through, a lot is based on one word: conversation, I think, and having conversations and having that kind of dialogue. How do we keep the dialogue going?
So we started this last year as a pilot, not sure where it was going to go. And it worked out so well that's how we came back again. The 4-3 said, let's do it again. They're committing their resources. We actually got feedback that they wanted to open it up to not just NYPD, because there were other law enforcement officers who our guys were coming in contact with. Our men and women were coming. It's not just men, And so we decided to approach other law enforcement that sort of interacted with our population. So we reached out to the Southern District of New York, which handles federal probation. We reached out to State Department of Corrections, New York City Probation, and PSA 8 that handles the NYCHA communities that are in our surrounding district. All of them were very happy to have the conversation, and we want to use this as a model to say, we're taking one day, Monday, April 16th, having different rooms at the Sotomayor Center dedicated to that particular law enforcement area, and having returning citizens or people that have experience kind of going in a room and having a frank and respectful exchange about their experiences. And that's where it starts. And if we can kind of build this up over time and show this is what happens, you don't have to be afraid to go in the room and have a conversation. There's been a lot of pushback. Well, if we put someone in a room, we don't know what's going to be said. We don't want it to be the wrong word to be said. And, we know our officers. And so I'm like, well, this is why there's a reason to have this, right? Because it helps you to calibrate. And really, as Mr. Paul said, breathe and control. Like really calibrate what you're trying to say and what you're thinking and what you do before you do it. And I think it's a good model that could be used more broadly. We want to just kind of keep doing it and showing how in communities of color you can have a very respectful dialogue amongst different law enforcement officers and the community.
Is dialogue effective?
Very effective. I mean, that communication is key. You know, knowing what to say, knowing how to say it, when to say it, the tones, the volume, the body language, you know, that all makes a difference. You know, so the conversation is very important, especially in our communities.
We're getting down to the end here, but do you think that law enforcement, and you can't speak, of course, for all law enforcement, but just in the people that you interact with, do you think that the conversation being had and having conversations, that there's a willingness on that side? Because sometimes we find there's a lot of pushback. Do you feel like there's more of a willingness, or is this stuff still stagnant?
It's in between. There's a part of the law enforcement community that right now, as stated from Ms. Lackard, that the 43rd precinct is very outgoing. And then there are parts of the other side of the community that there's still sort of a pushback, like I don't trust you because of the history. And where I come in is just like when I came into the studios today. The young students didn't know or would even perceive that I'm law enforcement. But when you can just be as a person, just be a human being, it should be looked at upon a person. You should not judge a person based upon the color of their skin or what they're wearing. You should judge a person based upon how they carry themselves. And that's where I come into the picture. I'll speak to anyone just as I would like someone to speak to me. Just the duality of life, principles, morality. And that's what I believe that law enforcement has. They're doing it, but more communication will bridge upon a brighter step for everyone to go towards in the future.
Right. Jen, before we get out of here, obviously letting people know about the Race for Re-Entry, how they can take part, where to go.
Yeah, so race is around the corner. We're super excited about it. We added a disabled athlete piece, so this is our first time this year. We tried a lot of new things. We're getting calls from disabled runners. They're calling, can their guide come? So we're going to have a lot of, blind runners coming. So people are in wheelchairs. The woman asked me yesterday, can she come with her scooter? I was like, you sure can. So it's really about being inclusive, right? And so we're going to have the disabled race, the youth race, youth ages 11 through 17. They're going to come out. That's kind of like Kwame's area, his folks, people, young youth who you're working with. We want them to kind of get out and network and with each other and fellowship. So it's going to be really cool. Visit our website, register, come out and walk with us. Soundview Park, April 21st, 9 a.m.
We want to thank you all for coming and sharing and be with us. Obviously, the conversation continues, and best wishes. We know that it'll be a success, and certainly the conversation continues to flow. Thank you for your heroic work, but also thank you for providing a platform for conversation, because sometimes it's hard just to get law enforcement just to sit down and talk. So the fact that you just came down and sat down and talked it's a wonderful thing. Listen, we're about wrapping up here on Perspectives. I want to thank you for joining us. I'll make sure to tune into Perspectives every week. And listen, share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in someone else's life. Daren Jaime saying, take care. God bless.
What's your perspective? Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
We are together. And for the last 20 years, we have been building on a vision to share our views, our voices on our channels. We are the Bronx. We are BronxNet.